All right, if you work in compliance, you know the feeling. A transaction alert hits your queue, and you get that little knot in your stomach. Suddenly, all those carefully written policies feel like they're a million miles away. Yeah, transaction investigations can be a huge source of anxiety. But what if there's a much better, saner way to approach them? Let's dive into a practical guide that might just change how you handle them for good. This really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's just you, a screen full of numbers, and this feeling that something isn't quite right. This is that moment where all the compliance theory just crashes head-on into the messy reality of one single payment. It's high stakes, it can feel really isolating, but what if the real problem is that we've been focused on the wrong goal this entire time? And that leads us to probably the most important question you can ask yourself, because if you get the purpose wrong right at the very beginning, every single step that follows is going to be harder, more stressful, and way less effective. So let's get it right now. So here's our roadmap for a better investigation. First, we're going to completely reframe what your mission is. Then we'll walk through the practical stuff, starting with the context, asking the right kind of questions, learning how to assess plausibility over paperwork, and finally, how to close the loop with confidence.
Okay, first things first, we have to redefine your mission. And I promise, this isn't just about changing a few words on a page. It's a fundamental mindset shift that's going to transform your entire approach.
So to get there, we need to start by just completely smashing a very common and very unhelpful myth about what your job is supposed to be. Listen, your job is not to be a prosecutor. You're not trying to prove there's money laundering or find some underlying crime. And you are definitely not supposed to collect every single document you can think of just in case. Your actual mission is so much simpler and a whole lot more focused. Here it is. This is the question. That's it. Does this make sense? Your entire role is to assess if something is plausible and consistent based on what you already know. Everything else we're about to talk about flows from this one simple, powerful question. So with our new mission locked in, where do we actually begin? Well, I can tell you the single biggest mistake most people make is jumping straight into the transaction details. The most critical first step is to understand the context. The transaction itself actually comes second. Seriously, before you even look at the payment, you have to have this information down cold. Who is this customer? Why did we give them that risk rating in the first place? Because, that rating sets your baseline for what normal should even look like. What's their business? And maybe most importantly, is this new transaction consistent with their history? I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, the customer's past behavior gives you almost the entire answer. Okay, so once you have the context, now you can finally turn your attention to the transaction. But again, the goal isn't just to stare at it. The goal is to understand it so you can form clear, targeted, and intelligent questions. This shows the huge difference between just guessing and actually investigating. The description on the left, that's a passive, vague guess. The one on the right, though, is a clear, concise summary. And here's the rule of thumb. If you can't write the sentence on the right, you are just not ready to contact the customer, period. And this brings us to another crucial point. Not all of these risks apply to every transaction. Your questions have to target the relevant risks. Is this really a potential sanctions issue, or does it feel more like a fraud concern? A complex wire to a high-risk country, okay, that points to sanctions and money laundering. A sudden, large domestic transfer from an elderly customer's account, that looks a lot more like fraud. Focusing like this is what helps you avoid that trap of just hoarding documents for no reason. So, what's a reasonable request? Well, you should always start with a simple, written explanation from the customer. Just ask them. Then, if you still need more, you can ask for 1 or 2 key supporting documents, like an invoice or a contract. These requests are proportionate, they're professional, and they help you answer that core question. Does this make sense? And on the flip side, here's what's usually just asking for way too much. Requesting audited financials for a single transaction is almost always overkill. The same goes for their full tax returns or demanding all related contracts. These kinds of requests are driven by fear, not by a specific investigative need, and honestly, they just create a ton of friction. Okay, this brings us to the golden rule of this entire process, and it is a major mindset shift. Your job is not to collect a mountain of PDFs. Your job is to apply your professional judgment. Burn this phrase into your memory. Plausibility beats paperwork. The documents are only there to support an explanation. They are not the explanation. A completely legitimate transaction might not have a giant stack of paperwork. Your real job is to assess the story, not just count the attachments. So, how do you spot a good explanation? Look for these signs. They're specific, they're consistent with what you already know, and my personal favorite tip, they're boring. Yeah, legitimate business is often pretty dull. Weak explanations, on the other hand, they tend to be vague or way too complicated, or the story just keeps changing every time you ask a follow-up question. Those are your red flags. And you have to pay close attention to the customer's behavior too. Sometimes the transaction details seem fine on paper, but how the customer reacts is the real red flag. Are they immediately super defensive? Are they trying to rush you or bully you into an approval? Now, this doesn't automatically prove anything, but it absolutely increases the risk you need to manage. Finally, you've gathered your information. You've assessed the plausibility of the whole story. Now it's time to make a decision, document it properly, and close the loop. Remember, your decision isn't just a simple approve or escalate. A really powerful and common outcome is mitigation. This means the transaction might be acceptable, but you're going to take smart steps to manage future risk, like maybe putting the customer on enhanced monitoring for a bit or updating their risk rating. Escalation is what you do when the story just doesn't add up or when the customer refuses to cooperate. And when you're documenting your work, just remember this. Regulators do not want a data dump. They want to see your logic. Your file needs to tell a clear story. Here's what triggered the review, here's what we looked at, here's how we evaluated the response, and here is our final conclusion and why. That's it. What we're really talking about here is a total transformation. It's about moving from a fear-based approach, one that's paranoid and obsessed with over-collection, to a professional, risk-based approach that is proportionate, smart, and even a little bit human. If you remember just one thing from all this, let it be this. The best compliance professionals don't ask for the most documents. They ask the right questions. Your real value isn't in building a massive case file. It's in your critical thinking and your professional judgment. So I'll leave you with this final question to think about. When you close a case, is your conclusion actually driven by your judgment, or is it just kind of hidden behind a big pile of attachments? The answer to that question really does reveal everything.